You're listening to the County Pulse on Lone Star Community Radio, KZCC, KZCW, LP Conroe, TV Channel 12 on demand, and online at countypulse.org.
Alrighty, everybody, welcome back to the County Pulse. Today we have a very special guest, as usual, per our interview series for local positions for the Woodlands Township Board. Today we have Dr. Dan Hannon, a candidate for position 4 on the Township Board. So, Dr. Dan Hannon, would you like to introduce yourself? Tell us about yourself.
I would, thank you. It's an honor and privilege to be here on County Plus. Thank you for having me. Just a little bit about myself. My name is Dan Hannon, and I'm running for the Woodlands Township Board of Directors, position number 4. Voting is on November the 4th, and early voting begins October the 13th. I am a 30-year resident of Montgomery County and the Woodlands specifically. My wife and son and I moved here in 1991 to plant Christ Church United Methodist, which is in the Woodlands on Research Forest adjacent to the Woodlands High School. I am a United Methodist pastor. Served as the founding pastor and as senior pastor until a year ago in June when I retired and was made pastor emeritus to the church. Shortly after that, I was hired as a consultant part-time as the chaplain for Interfaith of the Woodlands. And so that's what I'm doing. We've invested our lives for 30 years into the Woodlands through service. I'm a 35-year member of the Rotary Club and 30 years Rotary Club of the Woodlands, part of Interfaith of the Woodlands. Our son is a graduate of the Woodlands High School, class of '01. And one of my community services that I've done is for 28 seasons, and I will begin my 28th this year. I'm the motivational speaker for the Woodlands High School varsity football team. Every game day I get to go in and spend about 15 minutes with the young men through a positive thinking orientation to help them achieve and do their best. So that's who I am, and go from there.
Awesome, yeah. I guess our first question would be, what inspired you to run for office?
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I believe in community, and I believe in community service. I have always thought that as a pastor. I believe if the community in which you live is healthy, good schools, medical care, a good civic community life, then the people around you and the people that come to your church will be better. And so it's important to invest your time to the community, not just take from it, but to give back. So about 2.5 months ago, I was approached by a group of individuals, leaders, people I respected, and they asked me to consider running for the township board. And after prayerful consideration, I did accept their invitation. I would say the reason why I'm running is because I believe the township board of directors, which is made up of 7 individuals, they're all elected on staggered schedules, so it's 3 one year and 4 the next year. So there are 4 positions this year. Mm-hmm. I believe that a new or next generation of township board leaders is time to step forward, an opportunity for positive, forward-thinking leadership that is respectful of all persons, regardless of race, creed, color, or gender. And has an attitude of inclusive and community spirit. And so it's out of that desire, and someone who has a good historical understanding of what makes the Woodlands absolutely unique in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. And so we can talk a little bit more about that, of how the Woodlands is unique.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, definitely.
I would say one question that I have is, how has your experience as a pastor and as a senior minister make you a sort of a different candidate than the others in the race?
Great question. Well, so Christ Church United Methodist is a 4,000-member congregation. Mm-hmm. It has an annual budget of $8 million between the operation of the church and a school, the Christ Church school programs. has a $15 million balance sheet, and I led the development of 9 acres of land, excuse me, and to build 100,000 square feet of facility space through 6 separate projects. Wow. I tell you all of that not to brag, but I'm kind of proud of it, I guess.
Yeah, of course.
But a church, if you remove the religious aspect from it, it is a not-for-profit corporation, and it has to operate on a business process. And as a church, it's a service organization. I have 30 years of experience here in the Woodlands. I am in my 43rd year of ministry.
Wow.
And prior to going into the ministry, I was a public school teacher. I taught the 8th grade in the A-Leaf school system. My career path was to be superintendent of schools. So I got a master's degree from the University of Houston in public school administration, and I was certified in administering public schools. So my skill set include fundraising, budget management, HR functions in terms of managing a multi-staff, multi-million-dollar church, trustee management. How do you manage a facility, a plant? How do you grow it? How do you encourage and invite people to financially participate in it? So all of those are transferable skills. A township runs as a corporation. It runs on similar principles of a not-for-profit in that all the monies come from citizens through the tax process, and you have to be accountable to that. So I believe my skill sets as a pastor and managing a multi-staff, multi-million-dollar business are applicable.
Yeah, I mean, that's a very, very impressive resume. I mean, even from serving as a leader for varsity football players all the way to studying public school administration, I can understand why that certain skill set would be apt for this position. I do recall you talking about the Woodlands being a special place, and I completely agree with you. I mean, as I've grown up, I've come to appreciate the Woodlands, probably not to the same degree or depth that you have living here for so long, but I do recognize that it's special and unique. So I guess I would have to ask you, what do you consider the unique qualities of the Woodlands?
Sure.
And what do you want to preserve?
That's a great question. So the Woodlands Township is the only township in the state of Texas. There's none other in the entire state that is like this. There is no township except for the Woodlands. It is a special purpose legislative district, which means it was created by legislation from the state of Texas, signed by the governor that put it into place. So it's not just some subdivision that is well populated and well decorated. It is a special purpose district, unique. So there are cities and municipalities in Texas, thousands upon thousands, but there's only one township. So it is a master planned community that first began with the vision of Mr. George P. Mitchell when he developed this community back in the early 70s. And he designed it upon how to create an economically, ecologically, and environmentally sound living community that embraces nature as well as the need for urban living. I would say urban, I don't mean a city, I just mean that human beings living together. And so how can you merge urban living with an environmental development that is economically affordable and ecologically sound? And that was Mr. Mitchell's vision. And so even today, when Mr. Mitchell created it, it was just a community, but it was around 2007. I'm going to be off on the date. There was a catalytic event in which the city of Houston incorporated Kingwood, the Kingwood subdivision. They literally just came in and took it over. It's called annexation. Well, we in the Woodlands were anxious that the city of Houston could do the same thing. So there was the effort with the legislature, our representatives, to create this special purpose district that became the Woodlands Township, that created the board of directors. So there's a great sense of history that comes with it, and an understanding that we are in a unique place that really is in a magnificent partnership with the entire county. Our policing is provided by a magnificent working relationship with the Montgomery County Sheriff. Thank you, Sheriff Henderson. It is, and you know, you don't have to duplicate services, but it's to support and help nurture and build those that are already in the county. Mm-hmm. And so we don't have an additional police department. We have the Montgomery County Sheriff. Right. And it's a great partnership we have. So there's lots of stories like that about how unique this place is.
Definitely, yeah.
And with all that said, I would definitely agree. The Woodlands is definitely a unique place, and it's very interesting to me that we're the only township in the whole state of Texas. Right, yeah. Mm-hmm. And moving forward, what would your stance be on incorporation?
Sure. That was one of the catalytic events that led me to accept the invitation. There has been an effort to incorporate, meaning to dismantle the township,
right? Mm-hmm.
To eliminate it. It's not like nothing exists. Yes, something powerfully exists, and it's called the township.
Right.
And so there has been a movement to dismantle it, to incorporate it, to become a city. Right. So a word I'll give to you, a term, is called the enabling legislation. When the township was created by legislative edict, the enabling legislation, in agreement with the city of Conroe and the city of Houston, there would be no annexation until the year 2057. Right. That's 2057.
A while away.
Okay? Yeah. So you know, we're at 2020, so that's still 37 years away. Mm-hmm. Shortly, just 2 years ago, our magnificent state senator, Brandon Creighton, mm-hmm. Was able to engineer through the state legislature for the entire state Senate Bill 6, which removes annexation off of the table for any community in the state of Texas, of which now includes the Woodlands, in that the community has the right to vote whether they want to be annexed or not.
Right.
When Kingwood was taken over by Houston, the laws at the time was the community that has the extraterritorial jurisdiction, meaning Houston, right, can simply say, we're taking you over, end of story. Mm-hmm. The citizens had no vote, but because of our senator and this new law, annexation is off of the table.
Right.
So why would someone want to incorporate? Why are we going to throw away this magnificent community, mm-hmm, and this township structure that is a legal entity just to become a city in which you have to duplicate everything?
Right. Mm-hmm.
And so by becoming a city, you create a massive bureaucratic infrastructure.
Right.
You have to build a jail. You have to build a police department, physically build the buildings. Right. Then you have to hire the individuals. For every police officer you hire, you have to hire 5 behind-the-scene full-time people, forensic scientists, investigators, lab workers, jail attendants. I mean, so you see how this is getting real expensive?
Right.
The best projection, mm-hmm, is that taxes will increase. It doesn't sound like much, but it's something along the line. We're currently at a tax rate of 25 cents, and it goes up to about 30. That doesn't sound much, but mm-hmm, that's a large increase, and that's best case scenario. You're still going to lose services.
Right. Right.
So you're going to have a heavy tax burden. You get rid of all the special creation entities. You're going to stop the development. The Woodlands is within the next 5 years will be completely developed. There's no more land to build any more homes. There's, mm-hmm, some land for businesses. unlike the city of Conroe or Houston, there is not an industrial area. There are not warehouses. There's not manufacturing. There's not train depots. There's not port authorities.
Right.
There's no business manufacturing that creates revenue through taxation.
Right.
None. So you
Right.
increase the cost. Where are you going to get the money from? From the property owners, because that's the only source of revenue in the Woodlands.
Right.
So the citizens are going to face what I believe almost a doubling of their taxes with a reduction in services. So that's
Wow.
why I'm against it. And I have this kind of little mantra. The Woodlands is a place that should be replicated and not eliminated.
I like that.
Right.
Because here's the thing. There's no going back. There's no mulligan. There's no redo. There's like, oh, I don't like this. I want to go back. Once you end the township, it's gone.
Right.
Because the legislation was created for the Woodlands. It's not a general legislation that any community in the state of Texas can do. So people stand to lose a great deal.
Right.
And all I'll say is that becoming a city does not benefit the citizens
And the transition period too.
and
like
the transition period. Yeah.
5 to 10 years to build out all of that stuff and hire everyone.
Yeah.
Right. Quick.
Yeah, and and I'm just taking the police department as one department. Then you have to go to
Right.
utilities, and then you have to go to sewage, and then
Right.
you have to create something from nothing.
Right.
And instead of duplicating those services, we enter into this great working relationship with the county,
Awesome. Yeah.
and we contribute to the county.
Right.
And they have a way bigger forensics lab, a way bigger everything
Yeah.
than we would as a city too.
Right.
Right.
Bigger
Right.
and better.
Yeah.
Right.
Before we move on to, I guess, the future implications of this mindset, right? Specifically, you talk about development in the Woodlands. The reason I bring this up is that another candidate for position 2, Mr. Tom Chumbley, addresses specifically development. And he says that we need to rethink development in the Woodlands sustainably and to revitalize a lot of areas. So my question to you would be, how would you approach an aging woodlands, and is there an issue with an aging woodlands?
Sure.
Right.
So, redevelopment is an issue that every community faces, and it is a constant conversation. So, the Woodlands compared to the city of Conroe is, basically a teenager compared to how long
Right.
Conroe's been, right?
Yeah.
So, you have areas in the Woodlands where the homes are 40 plus years in age. There's some deterioration, there's some things along that line. So the word redevelopment surfaces a lot. There just needs to be a way of reimagining how you can improve the value of property and how you can repurpose areas that maintain. We have in the Woodlands what we call covenants, not deed restrictions, but covenants. And I mean this in great sincerity. Trees are sacred in the Woodlands.
Right. Right.
And there is a rhyme and reason to absolutely everything in the Woodlands. And you have to have a permit to cut a tree down.
Right. And don't they have like a map of every single tree or
Yes,
something?
I mean, and so it's just not like you can just go in and clear cut everything.
Right.
That's just not going to happen. It's against our covenants. So within the concept, remember I used the words environmental, ecological development, the
Right.
ecology. How does nature grow, and how can human beings live in nature? That same mindset governs how you redevelop the property that will encourage people getting involved.
Right.
So, there are areas that there are more business opportunities that need to be addressed. There are a lot of companies that work that have been in conversation with the Economic Development Corporation in the Woodlands who works with companies locally, nationally, and internationally to bring their operations to Montgomery County and specifically to the Woodlands. And there are a lot of opportunities for that to happen. So we have to nurture that. I learned something in the church business. As I'm trying to, when we started Christ Church, I had 0 people, no property, no members, no buildings, nothing. Right. I was given $39,000 and a pat on the back and said, good luck. So as you're trying to build buildings, we have $15 million worth of buildings. You just don't build that overnight. I've learned when you're trying to build something, you can ask people to give more money, or you can get more people involved in giving.
Right.
Okay? So it's the same thing in municipal governance. You can ask people to give more money, i.e. increase taxes. You can do that. People don't like that. Or you can invite more people to come into the community and bring their resources and bring their businesses and to bring their families. And all of a sudden you have more people giving more money and you're able to do more things. So we need to be intentional about bringing new business, cutting edge businesses, new technologies, looking into all of that. And I'll close this part by saying, Montgomery County really is emerging as a powerful business center in Southeast Texas and in our whole region. We now have an energy corridor, especially with ExxonMobil moving in. Now we're all disappointed that Anadarko got taken over, but still there's that energy corridor.
Right.
And we now have the Texas Medical Center in microcosm in Montgomery County. Every single medical institution outside of the medical schools that are in the Texas Medical Center are now in Montgomery County. We have people that travel all over the state and the nation. Texas Children's, for example, the Texas Children's Hospital here in Montgomery County. We have people that come from all over the world to Montgomery County.
Right.
And there's rich opportunity to grow business.
Yeah.
And that's my take on it.
Yeah.
And if you incorporate, you're going to shut that down because you automatically throw a large price tag that you simply are going to have to tax the citizens because there's no business to really. There's just the sale. We have a district called Town Center, and we have sales tax revenue out of that. But with COVID and the lockdown and all those other things, the sales tax revenue has dropped precipitously, and it is. These are issues we have to look at.
Right. So, going straight off of that, like you said, there's a big drop in the sales revenue coming straight from COVID, and that's a situation that we're still facing going into this election term. What are some of the ways that you plan to combat that drop in the sales revenue that stems from COVID?
Well, the governor, God bless him, in the most recent decisions to return retail capacity, restaurants to 75%. If you go into restaurants now, you'll see that all the tables are back, for example. That's a big step. I mean, there are issues beyond just the township or the county that we simply have to react to. And the gathering process and the retail process is beyond our control. That's a governor control. That's a county control. I'm grateful for our county judge, Mark Keogh, and our commissioners. I think they are being leaders in the state of Texas in terms of keeping us open. So we have to encourage strategies to open up our businesses and encourage people to begin the process of coming out. And that's something we have to do.
Yeah, awesome. That makes sense. So I completely understand the goal of reopening and staying open. And I mean, that is almost an obligation to citizens, right? Not only do state and local legislators have obligations to keep themselves
Yeah.
running and keep tax revenue going, but also to citizens to provide the services they need. Expanding upon that into the realm of public safety, you prioritize and highlight on your website that public safety is the primary concern of your campaign.
Right.
So my question would be to you, how did you decide that that would be your top priority, and how will you factor that into the way you legislate?
Sure. Thank you. That's a great question. Public safety and law enforcement, through the surveys done by the township itself, there's a business side to the township. There's a president and officers. So they've done survey of the citizens, and number one or two, always, number one and two. The citizens are saying to the leaders, public safety is a priority. So first, it's a priority to me because it's a priority to the citizens.
Right.
The need to provide, we have one of the lowest crime rates in the region, and I think it is because of this great working relationship that we have with Sheriff Rand and Montgomery County. Sheriff's Department and Constable Gable of the Precinct 4, Montgomery County Constable. And there's part of the Woodlands, a small part of it, Creekside, is in
Right.
Harris County. So that's a whole nother conversation about how Harris County, because
Of
so
course,
it's,
yeah.
you've got
A
to.
little iffy.
Yeah, so public safety, and as we continue to grow, as we become more urbanized, meaning more of a city,
Right.
I'll speak to the Woodlands in particular. The Woodlands is beginning to experience a demographic shift. You have people that now travel to the Woodlands to work. They commute to the Woodlands and then leave the Woodlands to go home.
Right.
So it used to be the other way. You lived in the Woodlands and you drove it to Houston or to Conroe to work, and now
Right.
that's shifting.
Yeah.
Well, that also brings a shift in human behavior, and you start to begin the more dark side of human behavior, more organized crime. And so as we begin to grow and as this shift is taking place, a sidebar comment, if I were a land investor, I would have bought a lot of land in Willis because the Woodlands is becoming a urban center for work. And people are now calling Montgomery, Magnolia, and Willis home. So they've become the suburbs to Conroe and the
That's
Woodlands.
interesting.
Because people don't want to work here and then drive back into Houston. They don't want to do that. So you can just predict statistically an increase in crime. So we have to be proactive about understanding white-collar crime, blue-collar crime, violent crime, motor vehicle accidents and crimes. And so we have to continue to partner with Montgomery County, 911 response, our EMTs, emergency fire department. These are things that have to have constant conversation because it's very important for our citizens.
I agree.
Yeah.
So I'm glad you addressed that. That definitely makes it makes it clear as to why it's a priority. I do appreciate that. But looking beyond the now in the next couple of years, how do you anticipate, specifically, you talk about, let me just backtrack. Specifically, you talk about replicating the township model, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you anticipate factoring that into the way that you utilize your new position? New, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you suggest that the model is expanded outside of the Woodlands?
Well, it's interesting. We have a story to tell. We're grateful for Mr. Mitchell, but not just Mr. Mitchell, all of the men and women who were a part of creating this community, which is unique, really, in the nation. The Woodlands is considered one of the top places to live in the nation. Recent publications show it as #1 in Texas. Wow. So there is something that can be told, a story that can be told and shared with other fellow citizens, other regions of the state that may be like us that don't want to be annexed by Amarillo or Dallas or Lufkin or I mean, so here's a story of how we did it. It's not that we're going to evangelize the state and say we want you to be a township. However, the township model is very prevalent in the East Coast, especially in places like Pennsylvania. And in that region, you'll find townships all over the place. Right. And it's just an interesting way. And so maybe this is a new model for unincorporated areas in the community who don't want to be annexed by a larger community. So that's what I mean by it's a story. I'm not going to use time. Of course, a director is a non-paid position, so I'm not going to take taxpayer money to go do that. I still won't. But if asked, we have a story to tell.
Right, definitely.
And then translating that story, building off of that.
Right.
One thing I would ask you, I know you said that you were the motivational speaker for the Woodlands High School football team. I would build that into my question for you is, how are you going to use your position as the director to get all the young children and the young kids in the Woodlands interested in and be more politically aware of their surroundings?
Yeah.
Well, that's a great question, and that really extends beyond just this. There's an axiom that I hold, and is that success makes an individual complacent. When you move into an area that's got all these great amenities, you just think they happened.
Right.
But having lived here for 30 years, I've seen the struggles, I've seen the fights, I've seen the hardships. I remember seeing someone chain themselves to a tree when they were trying to build a gas station in the Woodlands, and that's a true story.
Wow.
It just doesn't happen. And so it's important to be able to tell that story. I kind of lost contact process of your question.
Sorry,
I got so busy telling a story.
No, it was a really interesting story. But yeah, my question is sort of like, how are you going to use your position to sort of reconnect with the youth in our community?
Oh, yes, thanks. That's important because I'm 64, and I know you guys are looking at me going, he doesn't look 64. But I'm, I have an age range that I relate to. And it's usually 15 years ahead of you and 15 years behind you.
Right.
So I can relate on a social level with people who are about 50 and up.
Right.
Which means 45 and below, it's hard for me to engage simply because of the way sociology is.
Right.
So it's important that a new generation of people come of age to say, things just don't happen. And this is part of the American process. This is part of the greater political conversation today. Things don't happen, and things don't come from government authorities. They begin from the ground level. They are citizens who decide we want to form ourselves into community. How are we going to govern ourselves? And then that has to be passed on. So it's important. The chairman of, I'm not the chairman, the treasurer of my campaign is Zach Richmond, and he is under 40. And I told him, he said, I don't know a whole lot about doing all the finance. I said, I'll get somebody to do that. I said, but I need someone who can look at the new generation and say, I need you to meet Dan Hannon. Because it's not easy for me to meet that. When we moved here in 1991, I was 36 years old, and I made the decision, it's my time to get involved. So I got connected with the high school, which was the only one at the time, which was McCullough High School. Right. And I volunteered, joined the Rotary. I got involved. And it's time for, I want to be an evangelist to encourage people to get involved. Because if you don't, we lose what we have when we just let somebody else make the decision.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we want to wrap up here. We're reaching around 35 minutes, but I think a good closing question for you would be, how do you expect to incorporate George Mitchell's vision for the Woodlands into your tenure, right? And what would you like to articulate about that to possible voters?
Yeah. Well, first of all, it's important to retell the story. And when I use the word story, I mean, what was the dream? What was Mr. Mitchell trying to do? Over the 29 years of leading Christ Church, I realized every 4 years I had a different church, because there were new people coming in, people had left, died, left, new people came in. There were people who weren't here when the church started. And so you have to keep retelling the story. For example, why are there no straight roads in the Woodlands? If you've ever driven through the Woodlands, there is no straight road anywhere. Well, do you know that's by design? It's by design because your car is in a constant turn, which means the horizon is always the forest. Instead of seeing a straight paved street, you're constantly turning, so as you're driving, your eyes always see trees. That's by design. That drives people crazy. But learn the story.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, all the faith communities in the Woodlands are located next to schools or parks everywhere. That's by design, because Mr. Mitchell wanted to create these social zones where people came together. Where do they come together? Faith communities, schools, and parks,
Right.
and for shared facilities. Why build 2 parking lots when you can build 1 parking lot and share it? So you have to keep telling that story, because most people come from a background of a city. Well, you're just a city, that's what you do. And you put your
Right.
city in squares, and you cut down the trees, and you put the concrete in, and that's not the story. So you have to keep telling that story. I hope to be an advocate for telling the story, and I'm certainly, investigate ways in which that can tangibly take place. Are there neighborhood meetings, or I don't know,
Right.
a way of telling the story, and helping people understand what makes the township so unique and why their taxes are so low.
Awesome. Well, if that is all for today, I guess my final question would be, where can people learn more about you? Where can they reach you? And what contact information would you like to give out?
Yeah, first I want to commend you all for this. I think this is wonderful, and I would look at you and say you're part of the answer in terms of a new generation of people connecting.
Right.
So I can be found at my webpage at Hannon4township.com, and that has all of my, I'm also on Facebook at Hannon4Township.
Right.
And that has all kinds of information and ways of connecting.
Okay.
Right.
Great.
And do we want to remind people of the voting dates again?
Sure.
Yeah.
So I am Dan Hannon, position number 4, Township Board of Directors. Early voting is much earlier this year because of COVID. It begins October the 13th, and voting ends on November the 3rd, which is the general election day.
All right.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Good.
Well,
All right. Well, thank you for coming in. We appreciate it. We'd love
you.
to have you on sometime again.
Yeah.
Have you guys anything else to add?
No,
We're
we're all
good.
good. Thank you.
All right. Well, you're listening to the County Pulse on 104.5, 106.1, TV 12 on demand, and online at countypulse.org. We'll see you guys next week.
2 6-packs of Shiner, 99-cent butane lighter, Lucky Strikes and a 5th of Patron. Ice down that igloo cooler, tank of gas that ought to do her. I can feel a good one coming on. Throw in Ray Wiley Hubbard, sing along to Redneck Mother. Any blues I had before are gone. Another working week is over, no chance of staying sober. I can feel a good one coming on. break of dawn. Yeah, I can feel a good one coming on. Three blondes in a ragtop Mustang followed us down to the lake and didn't have to think about that too long. Skinny dipping in the bright moonlight, situation couldn't be more right. I can feel a good one coming on. Yeah, we're gonna roll all night, we're gonna get the feeling right. We're gonna keep this party rocking till the break of dawn. Yeah, I can feel a good one, feel like a good one. I can feel a good one coming on.